Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about reducing your chances of a bicep tear when doing deadlifts. And it's something I have some experience with. I have torn a bicep before many years ago, and I think this is a worthwhile topic. So let's put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling at my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. All right, first of all, when we talk about this stuff, we need to understand what really causes tears in the bicep on the deadlift. It ultimately comes down to arm bend. Too much stress being placed upon the bicep tendon in a position to where your bicep and connective tissue and everything are too weak to handle the load you are subjecting them to. The ultimate problem we run into, though, is that the deadlift, because we're doing it with bars usually, and if you're using really good bars, this problem becomes worse. So oftentimes the cheaper and crappier the bar, oftentimes this is less of a problem, is that the bar rolls. The bar tends to roll. And so to avoid this, we really only have 3 mechanisms to do this. You can either do a mixed grip, which is generally the preferred method, and I still say to people, mixed grip is better than straps for most of you, depending upon how strong you're getting and everything else. Because again, if you built up slowly and do all these other steps, you probably aren't ever going to be at risk of injury, even doing mixed grip. But that usually is where it happens, and it's usually the hand you supinate. But you have to find a way to prevent bar roll. Straps can be useful for this, and of course the hook grip, which is what I do these days. I ultimately think, when we come to solutions to it, I think the hook grip is the best solution, because it still allows you to use your natural grip, have grip strength, develop all of that stuff without having to resort to straps. But it is a much larger time commitment, and if you don't start doing it early on in your training, which is what I usually recommend to people, do it early, it can become a problem because it's really painful for quite a long time getting used to it. But there are other benefits because it carries over to other lifts, that particularly for people who have goals in athleticism and being athletic, learning the hook grip can be really useful for things like your power cleans and snatches and stuff like that. So those are lifts that most field athletes under respected coaches and stuff are going to do. And so again, if you have athletic goals, this is your easy solution. This is your best solution. Because again, it carries over to those also. However, for a lot of people, they don't want to do that, and they don't want to have tiny forearms and a weak grip and all this other stuff that comes from using straps too much on the deadlift. So ultimately, they go with the mixed grip, and that is the most common solution for people who really want to be well-rounded and strong. Now, what I will say on that up front, if you want to reduce the chances of muscle imbalances, you need to change that grip on every set, and maybe even on every single rep. In other words, if you're doing a 5-rep set of deadlifts, you might actually want to rotate it each rep, release the bar, and re-grip it on a mixed grip. But at the very minimum, probably every other set, unless you have a reason why you can't do one or the other. Like for me, I can't do the underhand on my left, so I was doing it exclusively overhand for years and years, which does have its own potential problems for muscle imbalance over time. So what you need to do first. Now, the other things you need to look at if you're going to do the mixed grip for it, your solutions are simple. Because again, this is a problem that's way overblown, and it's caused by weaknesses and bad technique, even in most people who tear a bicep. Again, until you start getting brutally strong, and most people aren't going to do that. But in which case, if you do plan on getting brutally strong, you don't want to have a weak grip. Hook grip is still your best solution. But if your goal isn't to deadlift 600, 700, 800 pounds, there are easier solutions for just going with the mixed grip. As long as you're rotating every time, you're not going to get muscle imbalances. Now, what we need to look at here is technique, and we need to look at strengthening the bicep in the stretch position. So the way you do your other lifts in the gym is going to fix the latter. But the former, learn to reset correctly on every single rep on the deadlift. And the reason I say that is that you get people who say, well, I'll just do touch and go. Right, and I'll maintain tension and do touch and go. Well, touch and go deadlifts have their own set of risk. They can hurt you by themselves, and I can tell you right now, the injuries. If you had to pick between 2 injuries, I would rather tear a bicep than herniate a disc in my back. Right? If you had to pick one, if you were told right now you're getting one of these 2 injuries, the bicep tear would be the one you would want. So the touch and go is not a solution. Furthermore, if you're touch and going, you're not learning to deadlift correctly. You only deadlift once on every set. The rest aren't deadlifts. So now you're putting your back at risk of injury, and you're still risking tearing a bicep on the first rep. So if you learn to reset correctly and pull the slack out of the bar, what I tell to people is you want to tug the bar and pull the slack out. So you want to actually ratchet up, drop your hips right before you pull a little bit. So you want to start into sometimes a higher position than you're going to pull from, and you drop your hips into it a little bit so that you can pull back on the bar. And when you pull the slack out of the bar, you can hear it audibly. You can hear it clank when that happens. If you pull the slack out first and you lock the elbows when you do so, you now put your biceps into a position to where they're not going to be pulled, like they're already locked into position. And it's that unlocked position where the overwhelming majority of bicep tears happen. The overwhelming majority. So getting yourself into that locked position on every single rep and training yourself to re-pull the slack out of the bar and reset completely on every rep. When we go back to that thing about switching hands, see how that can be a really, really useful tool? Because you're switching hands each time you're forced to reset, re-pull that slack out of the bar on every single rep. And if that means you have to take 3 seconds or up to 5 seconds between deadlift reps, then do it. Do it. Remember, time under tension is bullshit. This whole continual tension thing, no legitimate physiology expert really believes that helps you build muscle. So it's not a problem. You need a few seconds between each rep. That's your best bet on the deadlift. And that's what you have to do to make this work. Reset, re-pull the slack out of the bar every single time that you pull it off the floor. It'll ingrain a better motor pattern because you'll be used to pulling the slack out, and therefore you won't risk that bicep tear on the first rep, which still happens for people on touch and go lifts. So that's a big deal also. The next thing you want to do, you need to train your biceps to be stronger in a stretch position. How do we do that? We don't ever do a partial. Every single pull or curl or anything that you do, whether it's a pull-up, a chin-up, a row, even your pin leg rows off the floor, which is how you're supposed to do rows. You're not supposed to do rows standing the entire time and holding the weight. That's silly bodybuilder shit. One of the most ridiculous things bodybuilders ever came up with, and they came up with a lot. Pull from the floor. But you pull the slack out of the bar each time before you row off the floor. Same concept. You want to have the bicep in that stretch position. Do your chin-ups and your pull-ups from a dead stretch at the bottom. It means you need to stretch all the way out at the bottom on every rep. Curls, the same thing. Don't ever stop a curl short of the bottom. Go all the way down. Because again, what you need to do, you need to train your bicep to be stronger when it's in that stretch position. That will maintain better mobility in the bicep because it's strong when it's completely locked out. That will remove your tendency to want to reflex the arm before you pull, because you've trained the joint, the tendon, everything else to have good mobility in the muscle to be strong in that position. Therefore, it's not going to feel weak and it's not going to want to recontract and come back up, because that's oftentimes what happens on it. So then you pull with a bent arm again. Now, what I mean for curling, here's what you need to do. If you decide you're going to do curls and you really are worried about a bicep tear, I think the incline curl is the best lift to use for that. Why? Because it's a stretch position lift. You're already down here with a dumbbell and your arm comes behind you and you lock the elbow at the bottom. All right, training the bicep to contract from that deep stretched position will give you that strength, and it will put the bicep into a position where it's used to being loaded while under a stretch. All right, and when you do that, that is going to give you an extra protective element against tearing a bicep on the deadlift on that mixed grip. So basically the summary is I really recommend for most people the hook grip is your best solution, because you don't tear biceps when you're double overhand, and the hook grip allows you to do that because, again, that your thumb creates friction against the bar to stop it from rolling. So the hook grip works well, and again, guys like Calor Woolham have deadlifted over 900 pounds with a hook grip, world record holder. That's how he pulls. Mixed grip is still a possible viable solution if you don't want to learn to do the hook grip, but you need to alternate. You need to learn to reset and pull the slack out of the bar on every single rep. And you need to train all of your back and bicep exercises from a stretched position on every single rep. You need to make sure that you lock the arm out on every single rep. But the chin-ups, pull-ups, things like that done from a dead hang, that offers a degree of protection against bicep tears also. So that's your real solution. If you do all of these things correctly, you bring your odds down of tearing a bicep down tremendously low. Tremendously low. That and just not doing silly amounts of volume or taking sets of deadlifts to failure and other silly shit like that. Alright guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.